So this week, I was fortunate enough to have a Zoom meeting with many youth ministers from around the archdiocese that I work in. And the main topic of the meeting was social media, and a lot of aspects of social media were discussed during that meeting. And the conversation went in a little bit different direction than I think I probably anticipated. Because, of course, it's a virtual room full of most often somewhat like-minded individuals, youth ministers who work with the youth in many of the similar demographics with at least some degree of similar experience. And so I kind of anticipated that social media would be something that would be generally accepted as a powerful tool. But I found that wasn't necessarily the case, that many more youth ministers were at least hesitant to embrace social media, whether it was because they had concerns with some of the downsides of social media or because they just didn't necessarily understand it. And so I want to speak to that a little bit because I understand the hesitations and I understand the concerns, but I also think it's a powerful tool. So first, I think it's appropriate to talk about the downsides of social media and get those out of the way. Of course, over the last couple of decades that social media has existed, it's clear that there are serious mental health issues that can result from using social media too much or using it in the wrong way. There are problems of self-image and cyberbullying. There are issues of widespread misinformation. And so there are many potential harms with social media. However, we also have to acknowledge the good, that social media has shrunk the globe in a way that otherwise wouldn't have been thought possible. People can communicate in a way like never before. And you can also share good information much more effectively than was once possible. And while it doesn't replace human interaction, it has fundamentally changed the way that we can interact with others, other people that we might not have ever had the opportunity to interact with previously. And so there is good and bad. Ultimately, the way I see it, social media is a tool, not a simple tool like a hammer, but more like a tool that is powerful and can create major change, but also is very dangerous. And so I kind of equate social media to a chainsaw. A chainsaw can level a forest without much trouble, but it's also very easy to cut off your own arm or the arm of a friend. A chainsaw should not be put in the hands of every person. Certainly not every person is prepared or capable of using a chainsaw. And if you're going to use a chainsaw, you need to understand it. You need to know what you're using, and probably requires a little bit of know-how, and also might require some supervision. And when it comes to social media, that's also true. Social media has the capacity to do incredible things. It's a tool that it can accomplish so much. But it can also be used at great detriment. It shouldn't necessarily be used by every person. And when it is used, it should be used with some understanding of the potential traps that are in social media. It should be used with moderation. It should be modeled for people who are new to it so that they know what healthy social media use can look like. And also, it probably requires supervision. Certainly, there are social media platforms that are far more dangerous for young people than others. There are certainly social media platforms that have much greater detriment for our young people than others. And so I think it's important to recognize that not all social media is good. There are social media platforms that should not be utilized, and certainly we should be wise about what age young people are using social media, because I think far too often it has become just an accepted norm of our culture that social media is a part of life, which in a certain way that's becoming true, but that doesn't mean it's wise. There are some young people who aren't ready for it, and that's okay. Young people need time to become their own person and to understand who they are as a person before social media should be introduced into that mix. And even when they are ready for it, there should be appropriate levels of supervision to make sure that a young person is using it in a healthy manner. But in order to accomplish that, that requires teaching from others. It requires that many of us, whether we're parents or catechetical leaders, church leaders, teachers, what have you, that we have to be kind of entering into that mess. We have to understand it so that we can help our young people, and as well as help maybe our not so young people. We have to get our hands dirty. We have to be missionary people. Missionary people in the modern world. It doesn't necessarily, being a missionary does not necessarily mean that we're running off to a distant land to evangelize others. It might just mean that we are engaging with the culture that surrounds us and engaging with the people that belong to that culture in a new way. Pope Francis recently reminded us that we are called to accompaniment, to accompany people on their journey towards Christ. And an important part of that is walking alongside them within the culture and embracing the good. And I think social media in many ways offers a lot of good. And so we should embrace that while also leading people out of darkness. The church has a term for what that looks like. It's enculturation. Taking the culture and applying it to our faith in the ways that are positive. Taking the good and helping people understand what the culture shares about them, shares with them about who our loving Father in heaven is. And I want to draw on a very old example of this, and from the book of Acts, chapter 17. In chapter 17, in the book of Acts, verse 22, St. Paul is speaking to the Athenians. And when he's speaking to the Athenians, he draws on their culture, and it says, then Paul stood up at the Areopagus and said, "You Athenians, I see that in every respect you are very religious. For as I walked around looking carefully at your shrines, I even discovered an altar inscribed to an unknown God. What therefore you unknowingly worship, I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all that is in it, the Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in sanctuaries made by human hands, nor is he served by human hands because he needs anything. Rather, it is he who gives to everyone life and breath and everything. He made from one the whole human race to dwell on the entire surface of the earth, and he fixed the ordered seasons and boundaries of their regions, so that people might seek God, even perhaps grope for him and find him, though indeed he is not far away from any one of us." In those verses, St. Paul is drawing on the religious experience of the Athenians, drawing on that shrine to that unknown God and telling them that I know this unknown God. He is the God of all gods. He's the King of kings. This is the God, your creator, your loving Father, who desires much more for you than any of these other gods that you have. And he draws on that shared experience in their culture and leads them to a greater understanding of who God is. And I think the same is possible in today's culture. There are good things in our culture that we can embrace and use for anyone, whether young or old, to better understand the love of God. And social media offers immense ways to accomplish that. And there are people in the church who are doing a great job of that. But in many ways, I think the modern American church has lost the art of enculturation, and we have to get that back. We have to enter in and wade into the mess of our culture so that we can raise it up and bring out the good stuff, embrace the good stuff, and lead our young people and anyone else along the way out of darkness and into the light of Jesus Christ. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for participating in this very first low-key Catholic show. Go become saints, love your neighbor, and I will see you next time.